until 5 Apache women arrived desperate for shelter on his land. Retired rancher had lived alone for years. The retired rancher had lived alone for so many years that even he had stopped counting. His land stretched wide and open, surrounded by low hills and dry earth that changed color with the seasons. Mornings came quietly, with the soft sound of wind moving through grass and the distant calls of birds. No voices greeted him. No footsteps followed him. That silence had become his normal. He woke up early every day, just before the sun touched the horizon. His small wooden house stood firm but simple, built with his own hands many years ago. The walls carried marks of time, small cracks, faded paint, and memories he rarely allowed himself to revisit. He made his coffee slowly, using the same old cup he had owned for decades. The routine mattered. It kept his mind steady. After breakfast, he stepped outside and looked over his land. This place had once been full of life. There were times when laughter echoed across the fields, when people came and went, when the ranch felt like a living thing. But those days were long gone. Loss had changed him. Disappointment had hardened him. Slowly, he had chosen distance over connection, silence over conversation. People in the nearby town knew him only as the quiet rancher who kept to himself. Some said he was unfriendly, others said he was just tired of the world. The truth was simpler. He had learned that caring too much often brought pain, and being alone felt safer. He spent his days doing small tasks, fixing fences, checking water lines, tending to the land even though he no longer ran cattle. The work gave him purpose without demanding emotional effort. He liked that. The land never asked questions. It never judged him. Sometimes, as the sun climbed high, he sat on his porch and watched the horizon. His thoughts drifted, but he rarely allowed them to go too deep. Memories had sharp edges. Thinking about the past reminded him of people he had loved and lost, and of choices he could not undo. So he kept his focus on the present moment. The sound of boots on wood, the smell of dust, the warmth of sunlight on his face. Evenings were the hardest. As darkness spread across the land, the silence grew heavier. He cooked simple meals and ate alone at a small table. The empty chair across from him was something he pretended not to notice. After dinner, he read old newspapers or repaired tools, anything to keep his hands busy and his mind quiet. Loneliness had become a familiar companion. It did not surprise him anymore. It simply existed, like the land itself. Years passed this way, one quiet day blending into the next. He stopped expecting change. Life, he believed, had already given him everything it intended to give. What remained was simply time. One late afternoon, as the heat of the day began to fade, he noticed something unusual. From his porch, he could see the far edge of his property, where the land dipped slightly before rising again. At first, he thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. Movement out there was rare. Animals passed through now and then, but people almost never did. He stood up slowly, shielding his eyes from the sun. There it was again. Movement. Human movement. His first reaction was irritation. He valued his privacy, and strangers crossing his land were not welcome. He told himself it was probably someone lost or careless, and they would turn back once they realized where they were. But they didn't turn back. As the figures came closer, he realized there were 5 of them, women. Their pace was slow, uneven. They looked tired. No, more than tired. Exhausted. Even from a distance, he could see it in the way they walked, the way their shoulders drooped. He felt a tightness in his chest. This was not something he had planned for. His quiet world had just been interrupted. He considered going inside and pretending he hadn't seen them. That would be the easiest choice. It was what he would have done years ago. But something stopped him. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was instinct. Or maybe it was a part of himself he thought had gone silent long ago. The women stopped near his fence. They did not cross it. Instead, they stood there uncertain, clearly aware that this land belonged to someone. One of them stepped slightly forward, then hesitated, as if unsure whether to continue. The rancher watched carefully. He noticed their worn clothes, the dust on their faces, the way they stayed close together. These were not people looking for trouble. They were people looking for safety. Still, caution rose inside him. Trust did not come easily anymore. He walked toward the fence, slow and deliberate, making sure his movements did not appear threatening. When he was close enough to speak, he stopped. The women looked at him, their expressions guarded but hopeful. No one spoke at first. The silence stretched, heavy but not hostile. Finally, one of the women spoke. Her voice was calm, respectful, but carried the weight of desperation. She explained that they had been traveling for days, moving from place to place, unable to find safe shelter. Night was coming, and they had nowhere to go. The rancher listened without interrupting. He didn't ask questions right away. He studied their faces, their posture, the honesty in their eyes. He could tell they were not asking for comfort or luxury. They were asking for time, for rest, for a chance to breathe. His mind argued with itself. Letting them stay would mean breaking the boundaries he had carefully built. It would mean responsibility, interaction, risk. But turning them away would mean something else entirely. He looked past them, toward the horizon where the sun was sinking. Night in this area was not forgiving. He knew that better than anyone. He sighed quietly. The sound surprised even him. He told them they could stay for the night. Just the night. No promises beyond that. Relief washed over their faces, not loudly or dramatically, but in small ways. A relaxed breath, shoulders lowering, quiet words of thanks. They did not rush forward. They waited for him to lead. As they entered his land, the rancher felt something shift inside him. It wasn't fear. It wasn't regret. It was awareness. The awareness that his long-standing isolation had just been challenged. He showed them an old storage building near the house. It wasn't much, but it was solid and clean. He brought them water and simple food. They accepted everything with gratitude and restraint, never taking more than offered. That night, as he returned to his house, the silence felt different. Not empty, not heavy, just different. He lay awake longer than usual, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, his thoughts did not circle around the past. Instead, they hovered in the present, focused on the unexpected turn his life had taken. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. He didn't know how long they would stay or what would happen after. But one thing was certain. Morning arrived slowly over the ranch, as it always did. But this time it felt different. The retired rancher woke before sunrise, not because of habit, but because his mind refused to stay quiet. For years, his mornings had begun in the same calm way. Today, there was a new awareness resting in his thoughts. There were people on his land. He sat up on the edge of his bed and listened. The house was still. Outside, the wind moved gently, and birds greeted the early light. Nothing sounded wrong. Nothing sounded threatening. Still, he felt alert in a way he hadn't felt for a long time. He washed his face, pulled on his boots, and stepped outside. The air was cool and clean. As he looked toward the storage building, he saw faint movement. The women were awake. They had not slept late. Instead, they were already gathered near the building, moving quietly, careful not to disturb him. One of them was sweeping the dirt floor with a small branch. Another was organizing the few items they carried with them. Their actions were calm and respectful, as if they were trying to make themselves as invisible as possible. The rancher stopped for a moment and simply watched. He wasn't used to seeing this kind of presence on his land. Not hurried, not careless, just careful. He cleared his throat so they would know he was there. All 5 women turned toward him at once. There was no fear in their eyes, but there was caution. They greeted him politely, thanking him again for allowing them to stay the night. He nodded, unsure what to say at first. Words had never been his strength, especially not with strangers. He told them they could use the water pump near the house and that he would make some food. His voice sounded rough to his own ears, unused to conversation. They thanked him again, quietly. As he prepared breakfast, he noticed how natural it felt to make more food than usual. He cooked eggs, warmed bread, and poured coffee. When he brought the food outside, they accepted it with visible appreciation. They ate slowly, not rushed, not greedy. It was clear they were used to having very little. While they ate, he asked simple questions. Where they were headed, whether they needed medical help. They answered carefully, sharing only what felt safe. They explained that they had been moving for a long time, trying to stay together, trying to find somewhere stable. Life had pushed them from place to place, and each move had taken more energy than the last. He listened more than he spoke. Listening was easier. As the sun climbed higher, the day settled into a strange rhythm. The rancher went about his usual tasks, but now there were others nearby. He felt their presence even when he couldn't see them. It was not uncomfortable, just unfamiliar. At one point, he noticed that the fence near the western edge of his land was loose. He grabbed his tools and headed out to fix it. To his surprise, one of the women followed at a respectful distance. She didn't speak at first, just watched as he worked. After a while, she asked if she could help. Her voice was steady, confident, but polite. He hesitated, then handed her a tool. She worked carefully, paying attention to his instructions. They didn't talk much, but the shared task created a quiet understanding. He realized he hadn't worked alongside someone like this in years. As the morning passed, the other women found small ways to contribute. They cleaned the area around the building, organized old supplies, and even repaired a broken step near the porch using what they could find. None of it was asked for. They simply did it. The rancher noticed everything. It stirred something inside him. Not guilt, not obligation, recognition. These women were not trying to take advantage of his kindness. They were trying to earn their place, even if only for a short time. By midday, the heat became heavy. They rested in the shade, sharing stories quietly among themselves. Their laughter was soft, brief, but real. It floated across the land in a way that felt almost foreign to him. He stood by the porch, listening. The sound brought back distant memories, voices from long ago, moments he had buried deep. For a second, he considered stepping away, retreating into the safety of silence, but he didn't. Instead, he sat down and drank water, letting the sound exist around him. Later, one of the women approached him again. She explained more about their situation, not with drama or complaint, but with honesty. They had faced many closed doors, many nights without shelter. They were tired, but they were not broken. He nodded slowly. He didn't promise anything. Promises felt too heavy. But he told them they could stay another night. Maybe longer. He needed time to think. That evening, they prepared a simple meal together. The women offered to cook, and he allowed it. The food tasted familiar yet different, shaped by shared effort. They ate at the same table, not speaking much, but no longer avoiding each other's presence. As darkness fell, the land felt alive in a new way. Not loud. Not crowded. Just connected. The rancher sat on the porch after dinner watching the stars appear one by one. One of the women joined him, keeping a respectful distance. They spoke about the land, about weather patterns, about how the sky looked different in different places. Simple conversation. Honest, unforced. When she returned to the others, the rancher remained seated, lost in thought. He realized that the walls he had built around himself were not made of anger or bitterness. They were made of fear. Fear of loss, fear of attachment, fear of needing others again. That night he slept more deeply than he had in years. As days followed, routines began to shift. The women stayed, and with each passing day, trust grew in quiet ways. No one rushed it. No one demanded it. The rancher found himself looking forward to mornings again, to shared work, to brief conversations, to the sense that his land was no longer just a place of survival, but a place of temporary belonging. He still told himself this was temporary, that nothing permanent should grow from it. But deep down, he knew something had already changed. The silence he once depended on was no longer his shield. It had become space for connection, understanding, and something he had not expected to feel again. By the third day, the ranch no longer felt like a place frozen in time. It still looked the same, wide land, open sky, quiet mornings, but something underneath had shifted. The retired rancher felt it the moment he stepped outside. The air seemed lighter, not because the land had changed, but because he had. The women had settled into a gentle rhythm. They did not act like guests waiting to be served, nor like people trying to take control. They moved with care, always asking before using anything, always respectful of the space. That balance surprised him. He had expected tension or discomfort, but instead there was calm. Each morning began with shared work. One woman helped him check the water lines, listening carefully as he explained how the system worked. Another cleaned and organized the storage building, turning a dusty space into something almost welcoming. The others tended small tasks, mending torn fabric, sorting tools, keeping things in order. None of it felt forced. The rancher noticed how natural it felt to explain things again. For years he had done everything alone, talking only to himself or the land. Now he found himself giving instructions, answering questions, even offering advice. His voice no longer sounded unused. During breaks they sat in the shade together. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. Silence, when shared, felt different. It wasn't empty anymore. It felt peaceful. One afternoon, as the sun burned high in the sky, one of the women asked him about the ranch. Not just the land, but the man behind it. She asked how long he had lived there, why he chose such a quiet life. He hesitated. These were questions no one had asked him in a long time. He wasn't sure how much he wanted to share, but something about the way she asked, calm, patient, without pressure, made him answer. He told her about the early years when the ranch was full of work and purpose. He spoke about building the house with his own hands, about the pride he once felt seeing the land thrive. He did not go into deep details about his losses, but he mentioned that life had taken turns he never expected. She listened without interrupting. She didn't try to comfort him or offer advice. She simply listened. That alone meant more to him than he realized. Later that evening, the women shared parts of their own stories. They spoke carefully, choosing words that felt safe. They talked about moving often, about learning to adapt, about staying strong by relying on each other. They did not speak with anger. They spoke with honesty. The rancher noticed how close they were to one another. Their bond wasn't loud or dramatic. It showed in small gestures, shared glances, quiet support, understanding without explanation. Watching them stirred something deep inside him. It reminded him of connections he once had, connections he had convinced himself were no longer necessary. As days passed, trust continued to grow. The rancher stopped locking certain doors during the day. The women felt more comfortable moving around the property. Still, boundaries remained clear. Respect flowed both ways. One afternoon, a strong wind rolled across the land, kicking up dust and bending dry grass. The sky darkened slightly, and the air felt heavy. The rancher knew what was coming. A storm. He told the women to secure anything loose and move inside the building. They followed his instructions quickly. When the storm hit, it came hard. Wind howling, dust swirling, the world reduced to motion and sound. They waited it out together. Inside the building, as the storm passed overhead, the women sat close, steady, and calm. The rancher stood near the door, making sure everything held. For the first time in years, he wasn't facing the storm alone. When it finally passed, the land looked different. The air was clearer, the ground darker. The heat softened. Something inside him felt the same way. That evening, one of the women asked if they could help improve the storage building, make it more comfortable if they stayed longer. The word longer lingered in the air. He didn't answer right away. He walked the land alone that night, thinking. He had told himself this arrangement was temporary, that they would move on and life would return to quiet routines. But the idea of that silence returning now felt wrong. He realized how much he had changed in just a few days. He laughed more, even if quietly. He slept better. He felt useful in a way he hadn't felt in years. But fear still whispered in his mind. Attachment leads to loss. Connection leads to pain. He had learned that lesson once, and it had stayed with him. The next morning, he made a decision. He gathered the women together and spoke plainly. He told them they were welcome to stay for a while longer. Not forever. Not without discussion. But long enough to rest, to plan, to regain strength. The relief on their faces was immediate but controlled. They thanked him sincerely, promising to continue respecting his land and his space. From that day on, life on the ranch took on a new shape. They worked together, ate together, and shared small moments of peace. The rancher found himself teaching again, how to read the weather, how to care for the land, how to fix things properly. In return, the women shared knowledge of their own. Ways to preserve food, small traditions, quiet wisdom learned through hardship. Evenings became his favorite time. They sat under the open sky, watching stars appear. Sometimes they talked about the future. Sometimes they talked about nothing at all. One night as he lay in bed, the rancher realized something important. He had spent years believing that isolation kept him safe. But safety without connection had slowly drained him. These women hadn't come to take anything from him. They had arrived desperate for shelter, but in doing so, they had given him something he didn't know he still needed, a reason to open his door. And slowly, carefully, without force or expectation, the man who had lived alone for years began to understand that healing does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it walks quietly onto your land and waits for you to notice. The days that followed felt fuller than any the rancher could remember. Not louder, not rushed, just fuller. Each morning brought purpose, and each evening carried a calm he had not felt in years. The land remained wide and quiet, but now it held shared footsteps, shared effort, shared presence. Trust had grown slowly, like something planted carefully and given time. The women knew the rancher valued his space, and they honored it. He, in return, began to open parts of his life he had kept closed for a long time. Not all at once. Just enough. Work on the ranch became smoother. They fixed broken boards, cleared brush, and strengthened fences. The rancher noticed how naturally everyone found a role. No one competed. No one complained. When something needed to be done, someone simply stepped forward. One afternoon, as they repaired a water trough together, the rancher caught himself smiling. The moment surprised him. It had been so long since a smile came without effort that he almost didn't recognize it. During breaks, conversations grew easier. They talked about weather, about the land, about simple memories. The women spoke of places they had seen, lessons learned on the road, and the importance of staying together through difficult times. Their words were steady, not heavy with bitterness. That strength impressed him. In the evenings, they shared meals prepared together. Sometimes it was quiet. Sometimes someone laughed softly at a small joke or a shared mistake. These moments felt real, not forced. They reminded the rancher of dinners long ago, when life felt more balanced. One night, while sitting near a small fire outside, one of the women asked him about his family. The question was gentle, not demanding. Still, it reached deep. He stared into the fire for a long moment before answering. Then slowly he began to speak. He talked about love he once had, about people who mattered deeply to him, and about how life had changed in ways he never expected. He didn't speak with anger. He spoke with honesty. The women listened quietly. No one interrupted. No one rushed him. When he finished, there was no awkward silence. Just understanding. That night, he realized something important. Sharing his past did not weaken him. It did not reopen wounds the way he feared. Instead, it made the weight easier to carry. As time passed, small traditions formed. Morning coffee on the porch, evening walks to check the sky, quiet conversations under the stars. These moments were not planned, yet they became part of the rhythm of the ranch. But with comfort came questions. The rancher knew this situation could not last forever. The women needed a path forward. They needed stability beyond temporary shelter. The thought of their eventual departure stirred something uncomfortable inside him. One afternoon, he overheard them talking quietly among themselves. They spoke about next steps, about places they might go, about rebuilding their lives. Their voices were calm, but there was uncertainty beneath them. He realized they were being considerate. They were preparing themselves without placing expectations on him. That evening he called everyone together. His voice was steady, but his chest felt tight. He told them he had been thinking about the future, about what came next. They listened carefully. He explained that while they could stay for now, it was important for everyone to plan ahead. He offered to help in ways he could, guidance, support, connections in nearby towns. He made it clear that he cared about their safety and well-being. The women appreciated his honesty. They shared their hopes and concerns openly. They did not ask for more than he was willing to give. They simply asked for time and understanding. That conversation changed everything. From that moment on, there was clarity. No unspoken worries. No silent fears. Just shared awareness of reality. The rancher felt something loosen inside him. He wasn't trapped. He wasn't responsible for carrying everything alone. It was part of a shared effort. Days continued, and the ranch grew stronger because of it. Repairs lasted longer. The land felt cared for again. The rancher felt useful in a deeper way, not just maintaining property, but supporting people. One evening, after a long day of work, he sat alone on the porch. The women were nearby, laughing quietly over something small. He watched them from a distance. For years, he believed solitude was his strength. He believed independence meant safety. But watching them now, he understood something new. Strength could also come from connection. That realization scared him, but it also freed him. As the sky darkened, one of the women joined him on the porch. They didn't speak right away. They didn't need to. The comfort of shared silence said enough. She thanked him for the shelter, for the patience, for seeing them as people rather than a problem. Her words were simple, but they carried weight. He nodded, unsure how to respond. Gratitude still felt unfamiliar. When she returned to the others, the rancher remained seated, lost in thought. He realized that helping them had helped him face parts of himself he had avoided for years. The walls he built were not gone, but they had cracks now, and through those cracks, light had found its way in. That night, he slept peacefully. As days turned into weeks, the rancher knew change was coming. He didn't know exactly what form it would take, but he was no longer afraid of it. He had learned that life does not always return what you lose in the same shape. Sometimes it gives you something different, something unexpected. And sometimes the very thing you think you've left behind finds its way back to you, not to repeat the past, but to help you move forward. The man who once chose silence was learning that a full life does not mean constant noise. It means meaningful presence. And on his quiet land, surrounded by open sky and honest connection, that lesson was finally taking root. The morning the change finally came did not feel sudden. It arrived quietly, the way most important moments do. The rancher sensed it even before anyone spoke about it. The air felt different, not heavy, not tense, just certain. The women had been talking more about the future, not in whispers anymore, but openly. They spoke about opportunities nearby, about people who had offered guidance, about places where they could begin again. Their voices carried hope mixed with careful realism. They were ready. The rancher listened without interruption. He did not feel the sharp fear he once expected. Instead, he felt something calmer, acceptance. he had known this day would come. Shelter was never meant to be permanent. Rest was meant to prepare people to move forward. Still, knowing something and feeling it are different things. That afternoon, he walked the land alone, as he often did when thinking deeply. He traced familiar paths, places where his boots had worn the ground smooth over years of solitude. The land had witnessed his quiet life, his grief, his retreat from the world. Now it had witnessed his return to it. When he came back, the women were waiting. They spoke openly, thanking him for everything. For the shelter, for the patience, for the respect. They told him how the time on the ranch had helped him regain strength and clarity. He nodded, listening carefully. He told them he was proud of the way they had carried themselves. He spoke simply, but his words were sincere. They agreed on a timeline. A few more days to prepare. Enough time to say goodbye properly. Enough time to leave without rushing. Those final days were filled with meaning. They worked together one last time, finishing small projects, cleaning spaces, leaving everything better than they found it. The rancher noticed how thoughtful they were, how careful to honor his land. Evenings became more reflective. They shared memories, laughed softly, and sat under the stars longer than usual. No one pretended the goodbye would be easy, but no one let sadness overpower gratitude. On the last night, they prepared a shared meal, nothing fancy, just honest food made with care. They ate together, slower than usual, as if trying to stretch time. Afterward, they sat outside, the sky wide and clear above them. The rancher spoke then, something he hadn't planned to say. He told them that for a long time he believed his life was finished in every way that mattered, that he had chosen isolation because it felt safer than hope. He paused, searching for words. Then he told them that their arrival had changed that. Not because they needed him, but because they reminded him that connection still had value, that kindness did not always lead to loss. That purpose could return even late in life. The women listened quietly. Their eyes reflected the firelight and something deeper, understanding. When the night ended, no one rushed inside. They lingered, knowing moments like this do not repeat. The next morning came too soon. They loaded their few belongings, thanked him again, and stood near the fence where they had first appeared, the same place where everything began. There were no dramatic goodbyes. Just firm handshakes, gentle embraces, and steady words. Promises to stay safe, promises to remember. As they walked away, the rancher stood watching until they disappeared into the distance. The land grew quiet again, but not empty. That silence felt different now. In the days that followed, the rancher returned to his routines. Morning coffee, land checks. Simple meals, but nothing felt hollow. The quiet no longer pressed down on him. It gave him room to think, to breathe, to appreciate. He noticed small changes in himself. He spoke to people in town when he went for supplies. He listened more. He smiled more easily. He even offered help when he saw someone struggling. The land seemed to respond too. Repairs held strong. The house felt warmer. The nights felt peaceful instead of long. Sometimes he sat on the porch at dusk, remembering the women, not with sadness, but with pride. They had come seeking shelter. They had left with direction, and he had gained something just as important. He understood now that being alone does not have to mean being closed off. That strength can include kindness. That giving shelter is not just about offering space, it is about recognizing shared humanity. The rancher no longer thought of himself as a man waiting for time to pass. He thought of himself as someone still part of the world. Years later, people would sometimes ask him why he kept his land open, why he never fully shut himself away again. He never gave long explanations. He simply said that once, when he least expected it, life knocked on his gate. And he was glad he answered. The man who had lived alone for years did not suddenly become someone else. He remained quiet, independent, grounded, but he was no longer disconnected, because sometimes the truest changes do not come with noise or force. They arrive quietly.